I want to welcome everybody to our newest exhibit, Remembering Monticello. In the 4.5 years that the museum has been open, this is our 6th exhibit. I'm probably the person on the board of the Historical Society that has been invested in this community the least. But we moved across the street to 12 Russell Street about 40 years ago, and ever since we moved here, I've heard this story about Monticello, about this thriving sister city 15 miles away that was vivacious. It was it had a thriving agricultural economy, and yet it was destroyed in order to build the lake. So I've always felt like it's a very compelling story. And the fact that these people were forced to move and the entire community was scattered in different directions. It wasn't just a matter of losing your house or something. Your entire life, your community was set asunder. And I used to use this as a teacher. I was a teacher for 38 years, and I would sometimes use it as a writing prompt and tell the kids, okay, now imagine if you had scuba gear and you could swim underneath and see this town that used to be there, what would you find? And I remember one student drew this picture of a house still intact with a fishbowl in it and a goldfish swimming around.
Clever.
But ever since we started this museum, I've been looking for an opportunity to do this exhibit. And I had this idea that I would just go out and do some research, find some photos, find some artifacts, bring them in kind of like all by myself and put it on because, well, nobody really seemed to be interested in it that much. But thank goodness it did not work out that way. Carol, where is Carol? McGinnis, Fitzpatrick. So Carol is a person, you've heard the expression, somebody knows where the bodies are buried. I mean, really, this is absolutely true because they had to move the cemetery to higher ground. And she knows where the bodies are buried. And she knows every person living that has a living memory of it. She knows who has the photos, who knows the stories, and who has the artifacts. And she has helped us immensely. It's just amazing how much she's helped us. And her son, Sean, has helped us. I mean, he probably did more physical work in getting this together. I mean, including moving the 400-pound bell and helping us with rearranging our storage area because we didn't have room for, this exhibit and the one that was out. So they've really, really helped us. So I also want to thank Gloria Lopez. So Gloria has done the first 5 exhibits, and she said, I need a break. I need some time off. So you want to do the Monticello? Go ahead. Just go ahead and do it. Well, she ended up like typing every storyboard and holding my hand through this process, and I couldn't have done it without her. I want to thank all the board members that have contributed to hanging the exhibit and taking down the old one and putting up the new one. Some of them are not here. I also want to thank Charlie Wallace who tolerates us in this space, and we kind of tolerate him in his space back there. But he's been giving us basically free rent for years now, and he's really been a great partner. I want to thank Corinne Martinez who donated a case of wine, and if you haven't had a chance, we've got snacks and wine over there. And the Buckhorn, who generously sponsored so many people from Monticello to come and enjoy dinner. So you've heard enough from me. I want to show you a little video of some people from Monticello that are no longer alive. You're going to hear from, this is a video that was made in 1994, so that's like almost 30 years ago. And they're talking about the photo project of Perkle Jones and Dorothea Lange. So Dorothea Lange, you've heard of her. She's a famous Depression-era photographer. She was going to do this with Ansel Adams. Well, Ansel Adams was busy, and so she said, well, I've got this young photographer that I'm working with by the name of Perkle Jones. And so Perkle Jones is going to be on this video talking about how he got started with this. You're also going to see Bob McKenzie, who's the son of Albert McKenzie, who owned the mercantile shop up there, Cook McKenzie and Son. So this is the McKenzie that owned the store up there, and kind of he was the mortar between the bricks that held the community together. And he's also, I think, the grandfather of the McKenzie that owns the store in Vacaville, and also now owns the store, the Pacific Ace Hardware here in Winters. You're going to hear from Letha Samuel. She was born from two original families, the very first families that came to Monticello. And you're going to see her daughter, Tot Samuels. And then later we're going to hear from Buddy Gardner, who is the son of Tot. So we've got like 3 generations of people that you're going to hear from. And I'll let you see the video, and then after that I want to introduce Carol, and she'll see a few things, and then we'll hear from Buddy. So.
How this all came about was that it was a project that Dorothea Lange was very, very interested in doing. And her husband, Dr. Paul Taylor, was very interested in the water projects in California and worked on those projects for many, many years. And the fact that her son, John Dixon, was in the Bureau of Reclamation at that time, she was able to get first-hand information as to the progress of the project, how it was going along. And originally, Dorothea Lange had worked on projects and collaborated with Ansel Adams, but it just didn't work out personally with the two together, and Ansel was very busy when he was asked if he would join her on this project. So having known Dorothea Lange at that time, she invited me to collaborate with her. And of course I was more than delighted to be associated and work with her as a colleague. That's how it all began.
When Dorothy Lange and Perkle Jones, and there's a name that's easy to remember, Perkle Jones, kept coming back and then disappearing for a day or two and then coming back, they'd probably look up and say, oh, there's that Jones fellow again, and go back to what they're doing, which made the job easier for both Dorothy Lange and Perkle Jones, and they probably did a better job because of that. They were now kind of accepted. Not completely understand, because my mother, who lived there for years and years and years, said she never did feel accepted. She wasn't a native.
They came into the cemetery while we were out to my mother's and father's graves, and we were putting the flowers on, and they came over to talk to us and ask us, you know, who we were and what relation the people were to us. And one thing led to another, you know, and we spoke about where we had moved to and how hard it was and all that. And they talked about what they were going to do with the pictures, you know. And they took pictures of us. And we just visited it. Just a good old visit, you know. And then, I guess it was a couple of weeks afterward, we were back again on a Sunday, and they were there. And we talked again, and visited again, and they had talked about the various people that they had met in the valley, you know, and how well they got along with the people, you know. Everybody was happy to talk to them.
A lot of photographers go out into the field working with an open mind, and they don't have any preconceived ideas as to what they're going to find. So I prefer to work that way, keeping my mind open and keeping my eyes open also, and responding to just about everything. You see, working on this project, we had in mind that the days we were there working, certain things were never going to be repeated again. I mean, it was just once and that was it. Because, of course, we always had that urgency of the water coming up and flooding the valley. That was in the back of our mind all the time.
Perfect dam site. It was just so absolutely perfect. You'd think somebody built it that way. Maybe somebody did. So there've been talk on and off and on and off from probably the 1870s on about putting a dam in there of one sort or another. It was such a perfect site that we didn't mind the thought. We thought, you know, if they built a dam there and filled a channel, it would be to our advantage. It was a big channel. We didn't figure on them building it so high that it would flood us out.
Finally, they just gave us our orders, you know. You have just till, I think we had till October or November. November, I guess, because we left there in November. But they gave you just a certain time to be out, you know. And we resented it very much. It was our land. We bought it. We'd paid for it. We'd lived there for so many years. And yet, they could take it. And us fighting it. But that was the way it was. Everybody tried to fight it, but it didn't work. It didn't work for us. It worked for them.
We were there, and we wanted to, in the end, show other people what we responded to. Of course, doing a documentary photograph is, to me, I don't think it's possible to be objective. We're all very subjective about our work. So, of course, we brought our subjectivity to the project. As a little boy, I lived on the farm, so living on the farm, I had that background of love of my childhood, the experiences, which I had a wonderful time as a youngster. So I think that appears in some of the photographs. The little boy on the bicycle was certainly me as a youngster, and things of that sort I really had an affinity for. Of course, the opening photograph of the sweeping landscape of Berryessa Valley with the town of Monticello and looking over across the valley, and also the fact that of the conditions, the sunlight and shadow, and I sort of felt like God was with me when I made that photograph, and at the moment I recognize it as a symbol for the whole story, the almost closing of this curtain.
We knew everybody. We just knew everybody and grew up with the children. And in our school days, one of our school days was Valentine's Day, you know, when we had the Valentine box. And we worked for a week, you know, to get a nice Valentine for our teacher and for our best friends. And then at Christmas time, you know, we decorated the school. We made pictures with colored chalk, you know, on the big blackboards that were in the sides of the school, of the building. And we made holly wreaths. And then in the springtime, around Easter time, we had wild roses that we drew on there. Those were important things, you know. I had to ride a pony to school, horse, and I had about 5 miles to go, I guess, first grader. And I think about nowadays, these kids, the mothers worry about their youngsters. Of course, it's different times, but then I'd tie my horse up in the little shed there at school, the Oak Grove School, the upper end of the valley. And one of the bigger boys would loosen the cinch on him and take the bridle off. And many a time she's bucked me off on the gravel road going home, and I'd have to get her up to the fence and climb on again. So I tell my kids about it, and they just think that was a wonderful thing, but I thought it was pretty bad sometimes when I had to ride, especially in the cold, and sometimes once in a while it'd snow up there in the canyon where we lived. And it was pretty cold, frosty in the mornings, and that's pretty tough riding that far in the early morning. But it was fun. I look back on it. It didn't hurt me any.
During the Great Depression, the store carried many of the people for years and years, almost to the point of going broke, but not quite. It was, in fact, the hub of activity for almost all the people that lived there, no matter what they did. The store was the place to go. And if you forgot something, you'd come around to our house, which was kitty corner on the block from the store, and knock on the door, and if it was Dad that answered the door, they'd say, "Hey, Bruz," which was his nickname. Nobody ever knew him by his regular name, which happened to be Albert Alexander, but nobody knew that. It was Bruz. Bruz, I forgot the eggs, and I've got to have eggs for breakfast. Can you come down and let me in? And usually he would, and when he did that, 3 or 4 other people came from nowhere to come in and do some shopping too. So in fact, I think it almost was the glue that held the valley together for a long time.
Most of us didn't find land that was anywhere equal to what they had in Berryessa, because that was top grade. And you could grow anything in it. And so some of the people who bought away from there lost money by it in the homes, places they bought. Then they sold and resold a couple of times, and I don't think anybody was really happy after that or satisfied with what they had, because it couldn't equal to what they were raising there. But that was just a sad thing to go back and see the water raising in the creek. We always said, well, we hoped it stayed dry, but of course, it didn't. But it was just a sad thing. We still say we hope it goes dry sometime.
People that were not even born, they can look at these photographs and they can look at Lake Berryessa, and they know what was there, and it gives them a sense of a benchmark to look at, and maybe review whether certain projects should go forward or not. And that's our big dilemma is of change, and after it's gone, it's gone. There's no retrieval process. It's too late then, and it's a big problem. It's a big problem.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Woody and my favorite cousin Carol. And I'd like to introduce my wife, Doris, and our daughter, Susie. Susie still lives up at the lake. So when I get started, you might have to stop me because I can ramble on for a long time. But if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand and I'll stop and answer your questions as best I can. I was fortunate enough to live in Berryessa or Monticello. I was born and raised there. Excuse me. We moved out there in 1955. I was 10 years old, so that's kind of dating me, but we moved into the Napa Valley. My grandfather was a rancher in Monticello, raised cattle, raised about 600 head of cows. And then he moved into St. Helena, had a ranch there, a little vineyard, and then down by Yountville. That's where I was raised after we moved out. So throughout the years, I was fortunate enough to have my grandparents. I think my grandmother lived to be a little over 100. So I got a lot of history. And I was telling Woody, we live in Napa, and I was telling Woody, I said, you know, you need to come over because Carol's got a lot of stuff about the history of Monticello, but I've got a lot of stuff too. So, you know, I want to do whatever we can to preserve it. My daughter Susie's going to get a lot of it, but you know, I want to preserve it because, you know, those times when we were growing up, they were a lot of fun times. We'd take our horses and go down in Pewter Creek in the summer when it was hot, and we'd swim our horses, you know, and you know, we didn't need a lot of toys. If we wanted toys, we usually had to make them, you know. But you know, it was a good life, you know. We didn't know anything but work, and so consequently, when my wife and I don't know, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, we got some property in Napa, and so we're still farming. So we're trying to raise grapes. So anyway, so it's working out fine. So you know, I don't know. You know, if anybody has any questions, now's the time. What's that all about? Oh, what's your question?
Tell us about your bike.
Oh. If you saw a bicycle on the video with a black dog and somebody riding it, that was my stinking older brother, and that was my bike. And I still got the bike, still got the head badge. I just about a year ago had a guy, he didn't do anything to it except got it running. It's original. I got that bike for Christmas of 1954. So, yeah. Nice. But anyway, yeah, you know, it was a good life. I mean, you know, kids in the summertime up there, all we did was wear swimming suits. Didn't have any shoes on. Used to swim and hunt and fish. And I told my neighbor down there, I said, well, you know what we used to do? I said, you probably won't believe this, but we used to take a little piece of wax paper and we'd put a big glob of Crisco in that paper and wrap it up, and we'd put it in the back of our swimming suit. And we'd take our shotgun, we always had a little 410 or 22, take it down, and my grandfather owned all the land along the town, and that's where I lived. And so, yes?
So you have two grandfathers. Which grandfather are you talking about?
Oh, good question. I'm talking about Henry Samuels. My other grandfather was Ed Gardner. He had the stage line that brought the kids, high school kids from Monticello to Winters.
Wow.
So, yes.
I got the question is from your grandparents. As a kid, what did you remember your parents and grandparents saying about having to move out? What was their thoughts?
You know, I don't really remember very much. I was old enough, but I think my grandmother was the one that used to do a lot of swearing. But honestly, I can't answer that. I wish I could. I don't know. Yes?
Tell us a little bit about the rodeo.
You know, oh man. When we were going to school up there, the last year they had the rodeo. Jess and Virginia Dooley was the teachers at the school, man and wife, husband and wife. And so Mr. Dooley had all the kids in school. We had to go over there where the rodeo grounds were for about 1 month. And we had to hoe all the weeds, and we had to make it spotless, so they didn't want any fires. As you see, this picture here, they're cooking underground. Now, my grandfather, Samuels, is in that picture. But they cooked beans and beef and stuff underground, you know, it was, you know. And that a picture up on top of the rodeo where those two ladies are, the one on the right is my mother.
That rodeo was known all over.
Well, yeah, it was. One of the, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wondered, do you remember what the largest building in Monticello was?
Probably the Bruins house. That's just, no, that's Murray Clark's house.
We have one of, what, they're moving it. It's one of the Berkeley.
Well, no, it had 2 big cypress trees in the front of it, but that was probably the biggest house there in town. I don't know,
Was there a hotel?
That sounds fun.
that, it was called the hotel. Now, to be honest with you, I knew Newt Kilburn, we used to play there, good friends here, but I don't know if people stayed in it as a hotel. Now, there was a hub, which was one, huh?
He didn't say walk.
Yeah, there was a 1 block away was what they called the hub. That was another bar. There were 3 guys from Napa went up there and built it. And they had a little bit of a restaurant in it where the lady cooked hamburgers and, you know, yes, sir.
So I'm curious, you started telling a story about going down swimming with Crisco.
Yeah.
Never finished it, I'm sorry. So anyway, we used to go down there with our shotguns, and this is the honest to God truth. And if we got hungry, somebody there would take the gun, they'd shoot 2 or 3 doves. It didn't matter if it was in season or not. And we also had matches, and in the gravel bars, we'd build a fire, take the Crisco, put on the dove after we picked it and cleaned it, and we barbecued it. We'd take a willow stick, you know, and we used to do that a lot. Now, I was telling you, I told my neighbor that, and he goes, you're lying, you know, but that's the honest God truth. But you know, you had to do the things, you know, I mean, you know, my mother worked,
Well, finish your story.
anyway, my mother worked, she drove, well, my grandfather Gardner, the one that had the bus, the Monticello stage lines that come down here, my mother got a contract from her father-in-law, which is Ed Gardner, to pick up all the school kids in the valley and take them to the school, and she used her own car. So, you know, that was another thing. And then besides doing that, she would run the telephone exchange a lot of times at night in the store, in the Cook McKenzie and Son store. So if you had to call out of the valley, there was one payphone in the store where there was a post office, but otherwise you could call during the day, you could call on your phone in your house to the exchange, and they would plug this stuff in, and you know, and they could get you out of town.
So was there a school, a primary school?
There was 1 through 8 in the valley, and you know, there was. I wish that my cousin was here today from Nevada. He came down, and he's in his 80s, but he remembers a lot more than I do. And he was in the school too, and it was, you know, it was, I don't know, we used to get in a hell of a lot of trouble. Excuse me. But yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of my question is, so my grandpa went to high school in Winters, my uncle went to high school in Winters, they lived in Monticello. So living in Monticello, what did you think of Winters? What was Winters?
Oh, Winters was cool, man. That was a big town. We used to come down here to youth day. I remember 2 years. You know, we used to, and they, you know, a lot of the, like my grandfather and both grandfathers And my dad, they'd always come down, bring their horses down and ride in the parade. And then we used to go up to the high school and we'd have some kind of sack races and, you know, and it was cool. It was a whole day outing, I know that. It took a long time to get down here though. But it, you know, I don't know.
How long did it take? From,
I think it was 17 miles, probably a half hour.
okay.
You know, it's funny because I had a guy call me. He knew I was into old Monticello stuff. He called me about 2 years ago and he said, "Hey bud, I got something you might be interested in." I said, "Okay, what is it?" He said, "It's a sign." So he brought it over. I got it hanging in my shop, and it's a sign about this wide and this high, and it was on the road from Napa up to Monticello via Wooden Valley, Moscow Corners, Capel Valley. So he brought it up and I looked and man, it's a cool sign. It's got Monticello 17 miles, it's got Fairfield, but it was where you turned off the 121 to go through Wooden Valley to Fairfield. And it had a hole in it, about this big. And I said, "What the heck is that hole for?" And he said, "Well, we found it turned upside down. They was covering a hole in the floor of a trailer house, and that hole was where the sewer pipe was." So, whether it's true or not, I don't know, you know, but I wouldn't doubt it, you know. Yes?
So was, I don't recall, was Rag Canyon Road the road into Monticello?
No.
Rag Canyon, no?
Rag Canyon, we were talking about that coming up right at the head of Rag Canyon, at the very south end of Rag Canyon, where my grandfather was raised, Samuels. I gotta start clarifying that. There was a dirt road that came from Gordon Valley through a little divide down into Rag Canyon, and then it went down and it crossed Pewter Creek and tied in with 128, and that time just about where the dam is now.
How big was Pewter Creek back then in Monticello?
I'm looking for a picture. There was a picture. That's the bridge. Okay, I've seen the water. I've seen the Pewter Creek, the water about right here.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, you know, and Pewter Creek, when it was that high, I don't know if Winters got, I don't think Winters, the town got flooded, but there was a lot of water.
Our bridge got washed out a number of times.
Did it?
Yes. Early 50s.
Yeah, well, that was a flood.
I have all movies of that,
Yeah.
One way out,
Yeah, well but yeah, it did run a lot of water. You know, nowadays the kids, you know, I mean, water's dangerous, but you know, us kids, we knew better. We'd go down and we'd watch it, but we didn't mess around. I've seen kids over there where we live in Napa, when Napa River gets high, they'd take inner tubes and jump in and float down and, you know, get hung up on fences and you're nuts, man, you know. Yeah. But anyway, and then I've got a little short story to tell you about this t-shirt. When I was in school, you could get t-shirts like this, and so probably about 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe Carol knows, it don't matter, but I had a friend of mine that was coming out on a ranch selling parts, auto parts store, and he said, "Hey, I do all this t-shirt stuff, you know," and I said, "Well," I got a picture of a t-shirt in Monticello, so I had a bunch of these made, just for the nostalgia of having it done, you know, I mean, you know, and I think they're pretty cool. The color, I think the color is pretty good because that's John Deere color, and I got John Deere tractors, but I think it's pretty close. So, anyway, yes, sir.
I was just going to comment on the Pewter Creek issue and a couple other things. So, my grandmother was cousins to the View family, and talk about how nasty the creek was. Red View's dad drowned in the creek trying to cross it getting home when he was a boy, probably in the late 20s. So it raged when there were storms. And commenting about, you know, people asking about Winters and Monticello, my dad's two best friends, my dad graduated from Winters High School in 1946, his two best friends were Monticello folks, Ted Eaton and Marion Palmer. Your grandfather, I remember him.
Gardner?
Yeah, and his son, Bob, and his
Bobby,
and his wife, Dorothy, who taught at Union School. I grew up on Road 29, she taught at Union School up until it closed. So they closed it because I was coming and, yeah, whatever. But anyway, so the connection between Winters and Monticello was incredible. It was super tight. And like I said, I mean, my grandmother's family had cousins up that way. My dad's two best friends, even though we are from Buckeye, which doesn't exist anymore. You know, we're from Monticello in the 40s. And my dad's, you know, used to tell me of his great memories of hunting deer and doves up in the vineyards that were up there. Deer hunting in the vineyards was fairly like shooting fish in a barrel. So the two towns are very connected. And my great-grandfather actually was on the Board of Supervisors right at the turn of the 20th century, and one of his proudest accomplishments, according to my father, was the improvement of the road and the fixes of cement grade so that you could get from Monticello down to Winters when the weather was bad.
I was telling the kids, excuse me, I'm going to let you continue, but if I don't, I'll forget it.
Sorry, go ahead.
If I telling our daughter and my wife when we come down today, we come around by the dam. I told them I can remember when the Pewter Creek would get high and it would get over the road and you couldn't get to Winters. So go ahead.
Wow. Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot more to say other than that, you know, Pewter Creek before the dam was a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, Red's dad died there. Red found him as a teenager. He had to go out and find his dad. Wow. You know, who had drowned in the creek trying to cross the creek getting home. And Winters used to flood clear up to Russell Street and down past Abbey Street, and the rattlesnakes that came out of the creek were incredible back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when the creek would flood, because the creek would flood, all the snakes would come uphill, obviously, they're not dogs. And so they were killing, you know, rattlesnakes on Baker Street, if you know Winters very well, that's 3 blocks south of here. Because there was no control in that creek until the dam was built.
Yeah.
But at the same time, talking about how people felt, my dad didn't even live in Monticello, but his two best friends from high school did. And, you know, I was born in 1962, 10 years after all things were set in motion.
Right.
And he lamented the loss of Berryessa Valley because it was just beautiful. It was one of his favorite places as a young man.
Well, just for your information, Bobby Gardner just passed away.
Oh, did he really?
I think it was maybe November of 22,
he had to
21.
Be really old.
Him and Dorothy lived from what I hadn't
Well, I know they moved off the ranch, but that was 30 years ago.
And Bobby was my uncle. He was the youngest brother. There was my dad. There was Bobby, my uncle, my dad, and then another brother that died in a car wreck going from Winters to Monticello when he was like 22.
Right.
Oh, wow.
One car accident.
But he had to have been like 100.
Huh?
How old was he?
92. So, and you talk about Red and Julia View and Ted and Mary. You know, they were good friends of ours. And yeah, you're right. Down there where they lived, you know, Pewter Creek was nasty down there. It was, you know, just above the dam where the dam is now, about a mile, maybe 2 miles at the most. So, yes, ma'am.
Ted View was in my class in high school and grammar school.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. I remember him. I was younger than him, but I remember him when he got his first pickup, and it was a 1955, you know, and I think it was the talk of the valley because it was new, you know, and there weren't too many people that had new vehicles. So anyway, well, if there's no other questions, I think I've said enough.
I'd like Carol to come and talk about what she has done since to preserve the history of Monticello.
Good question.
So my family lived in Monticello. My great-grandparents homesteaded on the north end of the lake, and every year since the lake was put in, that all the old timers would come and meet at the cemetery. At the cemetery that was moved to Spanish Flat, and they would meet every year. So I got to live everybody's memories over and over every year. And it was about 12 years ago, and like only 4 people showed up.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is, and one of them was, well, it was Pete's dad, Muller, Jimmy. Jimmy was there, Muller. You guys might know some of them. And it was like a week later he died. And I was like, wait a minute here, all these stories and everything that happened down there, and I'm not going to be able to hear it. I'm not going to be able to tell people. I want to preserve this. I want to, get everybody's pictures together, and so that's what we started to do. Murray Clark helped me, and Betty helped me. I had all my storytellers, all my heroes really, come and help. I had, it became magic, but I felt like it was the rest of the story. Because when everybody moved out of the valley, it was cousins and relatives and family that we didn't even know we had anymore, because everybody had to get spread from Timbuktu. Now, what did your grandfather used to say? It was scattered, or somebody did, scattered like a covey of quail. And my home that my grandfather built was moved to higher ground, and I got to live in it looking over the lake until I was 16. So I had people come into my house, would tell stories when I was a little kid, and I kept thinking, this had to be 100 years ago, I mean, nobody floods this town and makes everybody move out. So my whole life, until like I got to be like probably about 16 years old, that I figured it out. Like, this was just 10 years ago, this was just 3 years ago when I was born. My brother, my sister, both lived there. My mom met my dad there, so it goes on and on.
What is your pioneer family name for the people of, I don't know who you are, I know who you are.
Well, it was McGinnis.
The McGinnis.
Yes.
They're the original pioneers that came to the valley?
Yes, they came, well.
You have something named after you, like an island or something?
No.
Or part of it? No, okay, go ahead.
Yep. Question, Betty?
Oh, yes, you do have an island named after you.
Oh. I thought you did.
It's the McGinnis Island. That was up at the upper end of the valley,
Well, that was where they called it the Island Ranch.
Yeah, that was the McGinnis.
So, yeah, there's a picture around here on one of these sketches, and so my grandfather and his sister and brothers bought this ranch in town, but then my grandfather also built the home that was moved to Spanish Flat. So anyways, it goes on that we start the exhibit about 12 years ago, the museum, and the rest of the story, and it was magic. I mean, I missed a lot of opportunities. I didn't film a lot of people. I should have recorded people. I mean, all these things. So I'm so glad that you guys are hosting this here, and you're going to get the story down. And so, Woody.
You had the museum at Spanish Flat.
Right, so yeah, so we started the museum at Spanish Flat, and the building that we put it in was donated, the spot from the Plunketts, and they owned all the Spanish Flat store and all. And the spot that we had it in was where the first school was after they moved. There was no place for the kids to go to school. There was no homes, there was no community, anything, so that was where the first school was. And that's where Spanish Flat was, where the cemetery was moved, and the post office, the store, the gas station, and that was the new town, and that was before anything else started up there at the lake, before any, the other subdivisions started. And so we got to live all that, like the beginning of the lake, and all the resorts going in, and so kind of full circle.
So you had your museum at Spanish Flat, and why isn't it there now?
Okay, so
I'm just going to prompt you.
Good
yes.
prompting.
That's good. Anyways, we had it there, and every year we had like Monticello days, and all the old timers would come after their get together at the cemetery, and we'd have a big celebration. this last year with a fire, burned our whole community. Yeah, and the store got saved because somebody from PG&E was there, and there was the fire department, and they put out little fires. And then the ranchers that had sheep on the other side had just grazed the whole hill down, so when the fire came down, it didn't burn the store. So it was saved, and then a day later, a tree fell down and was on the back side of the museum and almost burnt down again. So anyways, prior to that, Woody and his team came up and had done an interview with Buddy and Janice McKenzie, and he talked about, maybe I could, borrow a few things, or I want to do this museum down here, and I'm like, sure, and so that it all worked out. Like, we needed a place to put the stuff and for people to see, because up there, maybe 1 or 2 people come by in a day.
Yeah.
But everybody was always, they loved it, anybody that came to the lake and stopped, they really enjoyed it, and it's showing them that big bridge is the biggest rock bridge west of the Rockies, and it still exists under the lake, I mean, so, things like that. It was like people thought it was really cool, so, and then kind of went full circle here because this building was built for, it's the dam building. Yeah, and so here we are where the dam started, and now, we got to come in and tell the rest of the story, so. And then,
So
what do
this
you want?
This building is what is this building?
It's the dam building.
It's the headquarters.
Was the headquarters for the dam.
Built by the Bureau of Reclamation.
It was called the Salon Project.
Army Corps.
Bureau of Reclamation Salon Project.
So anyways, Woody wanted me to tell a story about
They don't ask.
the most important story of my life. And I hope y'all have a little while here. I'll try to do it short. So, my mom used to come up and go swimming and stuff at Pewter Creek, which was down Big Rock, they called it. And she'd come with her family, and she was just a little girl, about 10 years old. And she loved to swim out to the dock, and and then she went back to the campground, and then she snuck off early in the morning, and she tried to get back out to the dock when nobody was there, but the dock had floated farther down. Well, she almost drowned. She went under. And the next thing she remembered is her head hitting the rocks and the gravel and hearing it. And she felt peace. And she was not gonna live. I mean, she knew it. She had drowned. Next thing she knew, some man had her on the other side of the creek and was shaking her and saying, "You'll never do that again," and she remembered that. And so for years, I'm like, "Mom, who was that?" And I'd ask everybody and all the old timers, "Do you remember that story?" "No," and my mom goes, "I never told a soul. I never told my mom and dad because I'd be in trouble." She didn't want to tell him that she snuck off and drowned, so. So I'm like, oh my God, it must have been an angel, or was it the Peppers, because they lived across the creek, and I try to dig all these clues, like who saved you, because that's why I'm still here. And so I was up at the museum, and this woman came in, and she's looking at the pictures. And I asked her if she knew anything about Monticello, and she said no, but my husband does. He used to come up here. He used to be a carpenter, and he used to come up and go swimming in Pewter Creek. And I go, "Oh, is he here?" And she says, "Yeah, he's outside. He's blind and he's on oxygen." So I plop myself down next to him, and he's like 80-something years old. And I start talking to him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't remember much." And his wife goes, "He remembers this story," and starts to tell me about looking down and seeing a little world going under the water. And I got chills right now. And he's like looking around and there's nobody there. And he's like, oh my God, I gotta save her. So he jumps in off the rock, skins his stomach up on the gravel, goes around, he sees the black hair, grabs the black hair and pulls the little girl over to the, and I'm over there going, how old were you? And I'm like, and what did you do afterwards? And he says, well, I told her that she'd never do that again. And then I said, and then what happened? He says, well, the people came, her parents came, and then I go, then what happened? He goes, well, I jumped back in the water and I swam to the other side. And that's and he thought that was parents there, but it wasn't. It was like people that were in the campground or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, you. And I gave him a big hug, and he's like, oh, what? And I'm like, you know, and he's like, what? And he goes, I just did what I had to do. And I'm like, I would not be here if it wasn't for you. Wow. And his name was, I don't know, you guys might remember the name, Frank Parada, and he was from Vacaville. And we were going to get him together with my mom, because I called my mom up, I got all the ages down, I'm like, that's, you know, oh my God, Mom, we found him. We were going to get him together, and a week later he died. Oh. But I got my story. I got the rest of the story. So, but anyways, yeah, it was incredible. So, thank you.
Every time I hear that story, it's just amazing.
Oh, he was my brother.
We kind of collapsed the show a little bit so that there would be room for everybody. We hope that, I mean, you can take a look around. It's not really set up that well to see everything, but we hope that you'll come back and spend more time. The video that you saw is only, 15 minutes out of about 5 hours of video that we have in our little video section. We've got maps over there with binders of every one of the original families. We've got the 500-pound bell. We've got the original, one of the original bean pots from the rodeo. We've got the Sisto and Jesus Berryessa. I'd never seen a picture of them before, but they're there, and they lost the land because of bad gambling debts. And anyway, it's a marvelous story. One of the things I want to point out is that we've got the Perkle Jones and Dorothea Lange photos, which are professional and very compelling, beautiful photos. And on this side of the wall, we've got the Muller Adams Clark. Muller Clark. These are photos that were found in an attic. And there were like 3,000 photos, but there was water damage. And so only about an eighth of them survived. And so we've got 40 of those photos. They're not very good quality. They're out of focus. But they're vibrant. They're alive. They're showing people that didn't know that their valley was coming to an end, taken from like 45 to 50. And then these photos were taken after they knew that they had to leave. So the juxtaposition of those two groups of photos is truly amazing. And then over there we have dam construction photos, and there's pictures of this building, as she said, that was the administrative and engineering office for building the dam. They destroyed Monticello. And now we're asking you to remember Monticello in this other building. So anyway, I just want to remind everybody, please sign our guest book. Okay. No, it's not. It's not.
That's how we're going to end.
And the guest book is over there. And if you feel like, this museum runs on donations, consider becoming a docent if you want to be a part of what's going on. We need docents. And we're going to end by, Rebecca's going to read a poem that was written by whom?
Ida M. Swift. I was just told I was going to do this a little bit ago, so we'll see how I do. I had a dream the other night when all around was still. I dreamed I flew up in the sky and lit upon a hill. And as I viewed the scene below, I saw a wondrous thing. Lake Berryessa spread itself like a giant bird, a wing. Its surface was like crystal glass, which framed a picture scene, a valley stretching mile to mile with fields and meadow green, a mighty bridge that spanned a stream which flowed all summer long, bordered with orchards white with bloom, ringing with sweet birdsong. There were houses too where families lived, farmhouses I could see. I saw old faces bright and plain, just as they used to be. There Gosling, Darden, Owen, Swift, good neighbors, kindly bent, dwelling in calm contentment there as seasons came and went. And as I looked, my eyes were dimmed, I brushed a tear away. Before me there, in quiet peace, the cemetery lay. On marble shafts the sunlight fell, the rolling hills beyond. A loving benediction seemed upon the sacred ground, the town of Monticello. With its houses large and small, the schoolhouse where the children played, the church and Hunter's Hall, Mackenzie with his busy store where people came and went, and Johnny Wasson's blacksmith shop where many hours were spent. The lone oak tree with its welcome shade where grain teams passing through would rest where its spreading branches made the cooling breeze that blew. The dusty road went up the valley, the dusty stage went to and fro, the schoolhouse where D. Davis taught in the days of long ago. There was Lon and Norm and Reuben Clark, Scribners and Johnsons too, Grisby's P.D. and Anderson's, all with children fond and true. And then the vision vanished as fathoms deep it lay. The lake was clouded over. I sighed and turned away. I woke and the dream was ended. My eyes were wet with tears as I realized it was but a dream of other years.
Thank you for coming.